I don't know.
Well, it's still Game Awards and Game of the Year season, so I got another Game Awards video for you. Today we're going to be talking about confusing or even perplexing games that have been nominated and in some cases even won Game of the Year. Now, the Game Awards might only have been around since 2014, but before that there was the Spike TV Game Awards, and throughout both of their histories there's been plenty of nominations and even some winners where I'm just like, how or why? Like, there's so many other better choices. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be discussing those games, their quality or sometimes lack thereof, and what should have been nominated or won instead. Obviously, all of this is very much of my own opinion. This is based off of my own personal experiences with these games, and you may feel very differently about these, and that's totally okay. Let me know down below how you're feeling about these games and what you think should have been nominated instead. Let's get a discussion going. As always, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Got the Patreon, the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Also got a drama-free gaming Discord that is open to the public as well. You can feel free to join and continue chatting there. Alright, let's get to the games. So for a list like this, there's only one game I could start with, and that is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This very much is my low-hanging fruit, my easy target, and I just had to bring it up. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was nominated for Game of the Year in 2018. Game of the Year. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've had plenty of choice words for AC Odyssey throughout the years. As somebody who actually played through the entire game with no time savers, I feel like there are several choice words that I could say about this game, and Game of the Year is far away from that vocabulary. I remember when I saw that it was nominated, I just immediately went, how? How was this nominated? Did they even play through the game? And if they did, were they using the bullshit timers? See, I think AC Odyssey isn't a terrible game, but I wouldn't say it's particularly good either. It has so many great elements to it. The open world actually feels pretty lived in, the ship combat's great, shoot, the on-foot combat is pretty decent here as well, and the story absolutely has some interesting parts, but unfortunately, it's all just bogged down by this almost live service approach to a single player game. This game is a slog, it is a chore, it is gargantuan, and it goes on way too long. The way the game is structured and set up is that you essentially have to do a bunch of grinding to make sure you're the correct level so you can actually defeat the enemies, and the best way to grind and level up is by doing the side content and of course dailies, and unfortunately the side content is just so cookie cutter and generic and cut and paste, and it all plays out so similarly. This game just gets ultra repetitive, super stale, and I just wanted nothing to do with it by the end of it. It feels like they took a 15 to 20 hour game and doubled, maybe even tripled the game's length. And how do they make this a reality? With lots and lots of padding. And you can actually circumvent all of this padding and grinding by spending real world money on time savers, which is essentially XP boosters. And might I remind you, this is exclusively a single player game. Funny enough, I remember when the ability to make custom missions showed up, people were immediately making missions where all of the strongest enemies in the game die instantly and you just win the mission, so you get a ton of XP and don't have to do the grinding. Ubisoft naturally went after these, but seriously, this was such a slog of a game, and so to see it nominated for the top prize, Game of the Year, yeah, I really was just shaking my head here. It was up against some pretty great other titles, but there were plenty of other games I would have put in that spot. To highlight a few games that came out in 2018 that should have been nominated instead, I have A Way Out, which is an excellent game, Detroit Become Human, which I think is David Cage's magnum opus and his best game easily. I also think Ni no Kuni could have been up there, and very much Octopath Traveler. I think all of these are way more enjoyable than Assassin's Creed Odyssey and deserved a nomination more than that. As always, it's worth keeping in mind that this is not the definitive Game of the Year awards. There is no such thing. The Game Awards and Spike TV's Game Awards are just one outlet. Okay, technically two, but you get what I'm saying here. It's not definitive, and I'm just kind of having fun with this list, but you know what wasn't fun was AC Odyssey. So this next game is another one that I feel like I've attacked a few times, and that is Inside, which was nominated for 2016's Game of the Year. Now, let me be clear, I think Inside is a perfectly fine game and the ending does go pretty crazy, but I've never been big on the rest of this game. I think the controls, feel, platforming, level design, and particularly the puzzles are just alright in this game. I was never wowed, I was never all that excited. and I just never found it all that memorable. I actually think the developer's prior game, Limbo, was much better in these aspects. I think the aesthetic and graphics, and again, the ending of Inside are pretty great. But a game, at least in my opinion, is a lot more than just looks and the ending. I think Inside absolutely kills it when it comes to, say, the art direction, but when it comes to actually being a video game, yeah, I don't think this is Game of the Year material, at least in my opinion. And that's why I remember being so surprised it was even nominated for Game of the Year. I remember it was nominated and won Independent Game of the Year, and I figured it was going to be nominated and it could even win Indie Game of the Year, but overall Game of the Year, yeah, I don't know about that. And while it might have won Independent Game of the Year, it was up against some pretty stiff competition, and I'm still surprised it honestly won out of all of these. It was up against Firewatch, which has a great story and voice acting. It was up against Hyper Light Drifter, which feels like it was one of the biggest indie games of the 2010s. It was up against Stardew Valley. Yes, the Stardew Valley, you know, like the most popular farming game ever made. And then The Witness, which is, you know, like one of the most popular, greatest puzzle games of all time. You're telling me Inside is better than all of those? Yeah, big doubt out here. If you ask me, Stardew Valley wins head and shoulders above all of these. Stardew Valley is like the greatest farming game ever made. It's one of the greatest indie games ever made, and it probably should have been nominated for Game of the Year instead of Inside. It's clear to me from looking at the Game of the Year nominees that they wanted an indie game in there, which totally makes sense, and I'm all about it, but Inside, no. I think Stardew Valley or even Hyper Light Drifter was the better option. My experiences with those games are much better than what I've had with Inside. Again, Inside, it's a fine enough 2D platformer that has some cool moments, but I've just never really seen it with this one. And so this one is just one of the biggest L's in all of Game Awards history, and it was pretty much all of the 2003 Spike TV Game Awards. Now, I understand that this was the very first Game Awards show, and it was bound to have some oddball decisions and some hiccups here and there, but some of the choices for this Game Awards show just make almost no sense. Like, I wasn't there in the moment, so maybe at the time things were being perceived differently, but here we are 20 plus years later, and I'm just scratching my head. The most obvious glaring example of this is that their overall Game of the Year winner, yes, the best game all year, was Madden NFL 2004. Now, I haven't sat down and played NFL Madden 2004. Maybe it really is just that amazing of an experience. Maybe it's so good that it's better than what it's up against, but here's the other games it was up against. It was up against Freedom Fighters, GTA Vice City, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, SOCOM 2, SSX3, Star Wars Galaxies, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Splinter Cell 1, and Tony Hawk Underground. You're telling me that the Madden game was better than all of these? These are some of the most well-received games in history. Wind Waker, SSX3, KOTOR, the original Splinter Cell, Vice City, Thug, like just how? And then to make things even more confusing, they actually have a Best Sports Game Award, which you figured, oh, it's gotta be Madden since, you know, it won overall Game of the Year. No, it actually didn't win Best Sports Game of the Year in its own category. It was nominated, but no, it wasn't the winner. Tony Hawk's Underground was. Rightfully so. Thug is hella good. But I'm just taking a step back here and doing even a basic amount of thinking, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense like at all. They did a Best Action Game category, which True Crime Streets of LA won. No shade to that, but it was up against Hitman 2, Max Payne 2, Panzer Dragoon Orta, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, SOCOM 2, and even 13, and I'll be real, I think almost all of those games are better than True Crime Streets of LA. Especially like Max Payne 2 and Return to Castle Wolfenstein, those games are amazing. They had a category for best game based on a movie, and Enter the Matrix won, and you might be, okay, that game's not that bad. It probably wasn't up against anything good either. Well, actually it was. It was up against the incredible Lord of the Rings Return of the King game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and Tron 2.0. All of those games are, yeah, significantly better than the crummy Enter the Matrix game. They even had a Best Driving Game category, which NASCAR Thunder 2004 won, which is actually one of the better NASCAR games, but man, it was up against F-Zero GX, The Simpsons Hit and Run, and Midnight Club 2, and yeah, I don't know about that one. And then to finish the confusing train off the caboose, we have Best First Person Action, which Call of Duty, like the original Call of Duty, won. And you know, the original Call of Duty is still pretty good, but it was up against Halo 1. It was also up against Return to Castle Wolfenstein, Ghost Recon Island Thunder, 13, and even Battlefield 1942. And I think all of those games are better than the original Call of Duty. Come on now. Yeah, this whole 2003 Game Awards show just is perplexing all around. Honestly, it deserves its own video for just how weird it is. There was even a WWE match. And you know why? Because gamers love wrestling, that's why. But yeah, the 2003 Spike Video Game Awards show was just weird. So for this one, we have Multiverses, which won Best Fighting Game of the Year in 2022. While it wasn't nominated for overall Game of the Year, I still think it was enough of a confusing choice to get on this list. Now, I will say, back in 2022, Multiverses was a lot more hype than it obviously is in 2025, and I did have a fair amount of fun with it. I think it is a decent enough fighting game. And when it comes to Super Smash Bros. Competitors, you know, the platform fighter, it's one of the best that the genre has ever seen, but Fighting Game of the Year, I've just never really seen it. And yes, obviously hindsight is very much a privilege, and if we look back now, we can see that Multiverses was certainly not it. This was when it was in beta. It won Best Fighting Game of the Year in the beta. When it actually came to the 1.0 release, I think they really just shit the bed. And Multiverses just died a very painful, slow death, and it's to the point where I don't even think you can like play it anymore. It's just taken off storefronts, you can't go online. It's really just a sad state of affairs if we're being real here, but Multiverses in 2022 was up against some pretty decent fighting games. It was up against DNF Duel, JoJo Bizarre Adventures All-Star Battle R, which was really just a port of a PS3 game, and then it was also up against the King of Fighters 15 and Sifu. Sifu isn't a fighting game, but it was nominated, and yeah, I would say that it's better than Multiverses. Out of all the games I just mentioned, I think the best one is King of Fighters 15. I think that's one of the best King of Fighters games, and that probably should have won Fighting Game of the Year. No, it did not have the hype behind it that Multiverses had. Multiverse absolutely did have a wave of hype, and King of Fighters has always been a lot more niche and just generally targeted. I mean, King of Fighters has always been pretty hard to get into. I myself have never really gotten all that into it, but even as somebody who's a casual KOF person, it's not hard, at least for me, it's not hard to see that KOF 15 is one of the best ones that the series has ever had. No, it doesn't go crazy like 2002, but I still absolutely think that there is quality here. There was quality with Multiverses also, but in my opinion, the game just had a number of issues, most of them being because the game was free to play. And the game had a huge player base actually when it first came out. I remember people calling this the future of fighting games. Well, it didn't matter that the game was free to play, it still died. Which goes to show that maybe it being free to play didn't really mean all that much when the game has some core fundamental issues and just the most aggressive microtransactions of like any fighting game. It was ridiculous. But I guess that's neither here nor there since the game has been delisted. This entire point is moot, and yeah, I guess we can move on to the next one. So this one, well, this one's just more funny than anything else, and that's that PUBG was nominated for Game of the Year in 2017. Yes, PlayerUnknown's Battleground was nominated for overall Game of the Year. Let me remind you that in 2017, PUBG had actually not hit 1.0. This was still an early access title, and it was being nominated for overall Game of the Year. Now, there's a few things to unpack here. First off, I'll admit that in 2017, I also loved PUBG. It was one of my most played games of all time up until that point, and I had had many, many hours of fun. Like, it was such a good time, and it was the first battle royale I ever got into. And it's safe to say I was not alone in that, as PUBG was the most concurrently played game on Steam ever, and I believe it still is. Never has there been a game on Steam where so many people were playing it at once. It was absolutely ridiculous. So yes, there was a lot of hype behind PUBG. It was wildly popular. It still is popular. But I'm talking it was huge. It was everywhere. It was hard to avoid PUBG. And so when it comes to, you know, popularity, absolutely PUBG deserves to be in the conversation for 2017. But as somebody who's actually, you know, played a lot of PUBG, especially back then, I'll be the first to admit that PUBG just has tons of problems. It is absolutely riddled with issues. And while a lot of them have been addressed, you know, since it's been several years and there's been lots of patches, it doesn't really change the fact that at the time, this was a rather buggy, unstable, unoptimized mess of a game a lot of the time. It was pretty janky, unpolished, and it ran like total dog shit. I remember people playing this on the absolute lowest graphics to get a half-decent frame rate if they were lucky, but then could go run Doom 2016 on like max graphics, which looks way better than this, I might add. There was also only one map. Granted, it is the best map of PUBG, not even close. It's absolutely peak map design when it comes to a battle royale, but there was literally just one map. The gameplay had a more than solid enough foundation, but there wasn't exactly a lot of depth here either. Most matches played out pretty much exactly the same. They almost always did. And again, even as somebody who absolutely loves PUBG, I can tell you that most battle royales run circles around PUBG, not just Fortnite. But Apex Legends, shoot, I'll even give Warzone a bone here and say that Warzone is probably better than PUBG. And so to see PUBG nominated for overall game of the year, I thought it was hilarious then, and I still think it's hilarious now that the early access battle royale was being nominated for the top prize. That it was in the conversation with Breath of the Wild, with Persona 5, with Super Mario Odyssey, some of the greatest games of all time, and then we got PUBG. And you might go, well, it was the most popular. It makes sense, really. If this was just a popularity contest, then why are any of the games I just mentioned even nominated? Should be Call of Duty, Madden, and FIFA. Like every single year, it's not based on popularity. It's supposed to be based off of, quality of the video game. And PUBG, yeah, it's lacking in a lot of areas. I still have a lot of fond memories with the game and China #1, but that's all those are, memories. I still couldn't say that PUBG's all that great of a game, even nowadays, and it sure as hell ain't no game of the year. So the next one is a game that I don't know if I've actually ever spoken on before, and that is The Outer Worlds, which was nominated for Game of the Year in 2019. Now, naturally, when you bring up The Outer Worlds, the first thing you have to do is actually bring up something that isn't The Outer Worlds, that being Fallout New Vegas, which I can say that I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite games ever, and I think it's maybe the best Fallout game. And so naturally, I was pretty excited for The Outer Worlds because this was Obsidian's next big open world RPG. It very much was inspired by New Vegas, and while I think it's a good game, I don't think it's a great game. I actually do have a number of issues with it, pretty much the same issues as everybody else. I think the companions are just on the weak side, especially compared to Obsidian's many other games. I think the story in general is just kind of weak. The gameplay is more than fine enough, and while it is certainly more polished than New Vegas, I don't feel like it's as engaging or memorable as what New Vegas offers, maybe because it's not Fallout. The game doesn't seem to have as much of its own identity as I would like it to, and while I think the game has fine enough pacing throughout, it's not particularly all that long, and I wouldn't say that it comes together in the most satisfying way. And that's why I think all of this leads to it just being a good game versus like an amazing game versus a game of the year, which is why I was just surprised that it was nominated for Game of the Year. Like, you all really thought that this game was that good? I mean, look at what else this game was up against. It was up against Control, which, yeah, I think Control's better than this. Death Stranding, which I think is great. The Resident Evil 2 remake, which just goes foolish. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, that's one of my favorite games ever. And then the winner, which was Sekiro. And I mean, for that year, yeah, nothing was probably going to beat Sekiro. Maybe Smash, but yeah, it probably wasn't. And now you're probably going, okay, what should it have been since you seem to know so much about this shit? I'll tell you what it should have been. It should have been Disco Elysium, not even close, for two key reasons. One, they didn't have an indie game nominated for Game of the Year, which is a bit odd, and two, it's Disco Elysium. Have you played it? It has one of the best stories of any video game, and it's some of the best writing of any game. It blows Outer Worlds out of the water, and while I'm not saying it would have won or beat Sekiro, I still think it would have been a worthy nomination, more than Outer Worlds, that's for sure. I will say though, even though I have been dunking on the Outer Worlds, I did try Outer Worlds 2, and it does seem like a marginal improvement over the first one. I haven't finished it, and at my current rate, I doubt I will anytime soon, but it seems pretty cool. Either way, the Outer Worlds, yeah, it was just alright for me. Well, Multiverses isn't the only fighting game I got beef with. Here we also have Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate Edition, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2020. Now, I'm not going to mince words here. 2020 was not a very good year for fighting games. There just wasn't really a lot released, and it's not really surprising that Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate Edition won. But that sure as hell doesn't mean that I agree with it. I've always said that Mortal Kombat 11 is the weakest of all the newer Mortal Kombat games, and I still absolutely stand by that. I'd rather play 9, 10, and even 1. Despite having an incredible roster, I think the core moment-to-moment fighting just isn't there. It's way too slow, it's not combo heavy. I don't like the gimmick. In fact, I'd rather just have no gimmick and just have straight fighting. And I don't like certain other elements that I know a lot of people don't really care much about, like the crypt. I think the story mode was fine enough, and there is a decent amount of content here, but the actual fighting itself, the most important thing in the fighting game, is just kind of lackluster in my opinion. And even as somebody who has hella beef with Mortal Kombat 1, I can sit here and tell you, yeah, the fighting is quite a bit better in MK1, at least in my opinion. It was up against Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, One Punch Man, A Hero Nobody Knows, Street Fighter V Champion Edition, and then also Under Night In Birth EXE. Like, I'd rather have a few of those fighting games over MK11. Here we had the ultimate showdown of MK11 versus Street Fighter V, Battle of the Mid. And in this bout, I guess Mortal Kombat 11 was the winner. I'd probably rather play SF5 though, for being real here. Under Night In Birth EXE Late is also not a new fighting game. The naming convention can be a bit confusing, but this was a rather large update for Under Night. One Punch Man, A Hero Nobody Knows. I mean, you probably forgot this game even exists, and yeah, I did too. It was just very forgettable. And so that leaves Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, which I don't even think is a great fighting game, but it was like almost the only new one here. I'd rather see it win over MK11 Ultimate Edition. Come on now. And you know, after going over all of these fighting games, I'm gonna be real, none of these should have won Fighting Game of the Year. I don't think any of these are particularly fantastic. The best one is probably Under Night. And that wasn't even really a new game. It just goes to show that 2020, yeah, it was just an L when it comes to fighting games, and none of these were particularly amazing. And then to finish things off, it's another Assassin's Creed. Oh, you thought just Odyssey was the only AC I had beef with in this video? No, we got Assassin's Creed 3, which was nominated for Game of the Year in 2012. And this is another one where I just go, how? How did this happen? Was 2012 really that bad of a year in gaming? And you know, 2012 wasn't the best when it came to games, but it was a lot better than Assassin's Creed 3, that's what I can say. I have always said that Assassin's Creed 3 is, in my opinion, one of the weakest Assassin's Creed games, period. I know a lot of people have nostalgia for it nowadays, but even back when it came out, I didn't think the game was all that great, and I thought it was a big step back from all of the Ezio games. I just hated this game's pacing. I hate the intro. The first like 4 or 5 hours where you're the Templar. I think Connor looks really cool. Like, he looks really fucking cool. It's a shame he's just so uninteresting as a character outside of his small origin story and few cool moments. I just wasn't really a fan of the story in general. The whole thing going on with Desmond Miles was pretty crazy though, and I low-key did like this. But when it came to the actual moment-to-moment gameplay, I mean, yeah, it's pretty similar to Assassin's Creed 2 and the other Ezio games, but it's just not as refined, not as good. The open world is not as good, and I found it to be just overall one of the more forgettable Assassin's Creed games outside of it being one of the few that's in America. Yeah, you get to play through some of America's most iconic moments and set pieces. Well, kind of. You're present there. You don't really get to actively participate, but you get to be somewhere. But a lot of these felt rather underwhelming and deflating, if we're going to be real here. I really did enjoy the ship combat. Apparently Ubisoft did as well, since plenty of other AC games have used it since. And then the last thing that I want to attack is this game's constant blinding white light. Whenever you pause the game, every loading screen, like, there's just this blinding white light that is just ridiculous. I don't know about you, but I don't play in the most well-lit environment, and even if I do, this is still ridiculous. I hated it then, and I certainly hate it now that my eyes have gotten worse. Call it a skill issue, but never ever liked that. Now, Assassin's Creed 3 obviously wasn't the only nominee. Dishonored was also nominated, Journey as well, and Mass Effect 3 were nominated. The winner would end up being The Walking Dead, and I'd say all of those games are better than Assassin's Creed 3. Even Mass Effect 3, with its crummy ending, is still way better than AC3. And I don't think AC3 honestly should have been nominated. What I think should have been nominated instead was Borderlands 2, which I think is still the best Borderlands game all these years later. It was nominated for Studio of the Year, 360 Game of the Year, PS3 Game of the Year, and was nominated for and won Shooter of the Year. I think it's better than Assassin's Creed 3. That's not a hot take at all. And ultimately, I'm just kind of scratching my head why it wasn't nominated, instead AC3 was. But that's all my opinion. All of this has just been my opinion. What do you all think? I feel like I might have had some divisive opinions here, and so I'd love to hear how everybody else feels as well. So with that, please stay safe, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.